What's going on, everyone? You're back with your boy Jono for another quick math lesson. Today we're going to look at significant figures, and this is the first of a three-part series on this topic. I'd really like to give a shout out to my old student Megan for requesting this video. If you have any videos that you would like made, please just get in touch and I'll make something that will help you out straight away. So we're using significant figures when we want to talk about really big numbers or really small numbers. And this does stem from like a little bit of laziness. We don't want to just write out zeros all the time. So another thing to think about is that when we've got these really big numbers, you don't have to be incredibly accurate to convey the meaning to someone else. Let's say you've got $100 million in the bank. Does it really matter if you've got $100,001,001? Probably not. So you don't have to be super accurate when you're conveying that information to someone else. So the way that I think about it is significant is what matters. Okay, so we've got to look for the numbers or the significant figures that actually matter to what we're trying to talk about when we communicate with someone else. So let's look at an example. Let's say that a farmer has harvested wheat all summer, and now they've got this amount of wheat, 791,352.2 tons of wheat. So when they're talking about how much wheat they brought in over the summer, they're probably not going to tell their neighbors that exact number. They would give them a rounded estimate or a significant figure of what they've done, which makes a little bit more sense. You're not going to have that number just ready to go at all times. But if you said around 800,000, your neighbors would know what you're talking about. So these kind of questions where we want to round it to a significant figure, all we've got to think about is what number conveys the most information. So if I wanted to round this to one significant figure, one number that would tell someone else how much wheat I've harvested, well, the first number is the most important. It wouldn't be any help talking about the 3 that's in the middle of the number. That's not very significant, right? That doesn't tell the whole story of what we've done. The first number is the most significant one, and we've got to round it to what's closest. Because 790,000 is closer to 800,000 than 700,000, we can just round this to one significant figure of 800,000. Then when we're looking at two significant figures, the first two numbers are the most important. The 790,000 conveys a whole bunch more information than the last numbers, so they're the two that matter the most. So for this one, it would be 790,000 tons of wheat. Then if we looked at four significant figures, you just have to count those 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers, and the fifth number is going to be our rounding. Because the fifth number is a 5, we're going to round up on that fourth significant figure. So this becomes 791,400, and that is to four significant figures. So for these positive numbers, the significant figures goes across from the very first number. So what I want you to think about when you are rounding these significant figures is that the first number is the most important. It conveys the most information, especially when it's a number that's greater than 1. That whole number tells us the most information. So from there, you just have to work backwards. It doesn't matter if it's a 0, if it's a decimal, whatever. You just look at that first whole number, work backwards, and if you get to 2 significant figures, 3 significant figures, it's from that first one that really matters. And the same idea happens with decimals. We just have to think about what actually matters when we look at these things. So those zeros at the start, we can't touch them because they are telling us where the first place value is. So we can't touch those zeros. Then from there, the most significant number is the first one we get to. That 4 is telling us that we are definitely in the 0.004s. That's where we're going to reside. So this number here is the most significant. Then the second most significant is the next one. And then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So it's almost like the reverse of our whole numbers, but we are just going past all the zeros. The first non-zero is our first significant figure, and then we just go from there. So sometimes we're going to have decimals as part of a non-zero example. So this is a really good example. We've got 40.7362 liters of water, and I want to round that to a certain number of significant figures. So if I've got one significant figure, the 40 is what's most important. Right? We're really close to 40 liters of water. So the significant figure is the 4, and then 0 is just left there by itself. So we've got about 40 liters. So that makes it the most amount of sense. When we've got to go to 2 significant figures, I'm looking at that 40, so the 40 at the very start, and then the first decimal after that. Because that first decimal is 7, and that's much closer to being at 41 liters than 40, I can round this number up to 41 litres. So if you're looking for two significant figures, it's the third number you see that's the most important one. Finally, we've got four significant figures. So the 40, the 4 and 0, they're significant. They're telling us that it's 40 litres. So they're our first two, and then the next two are just the next two decimals, the 7 and the 3. So because we've got to round it to four significant figures, we're really looking at that 6, and that's going to tell us how to round. So that 6 means that we're closer to 7.4 than 7.3. So my answer there is 40.74 litres. And you can see that each time we're adding a significant figure, our answer is getting more accurate, and that's really what we're talking about. The more accurate your measurement is, the more significant figures you can have, and that's telling the other person more information. So if you need to be just a bit crude and round it to big whole numbers, that's when we're talking about our 1 and 2 significant figures. If you want to be extremely precise, then you've got to use more significant figures and have more decimals after that dot point. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about how we can write these when we're talking about really, really big and really, really small numbers, so we don't have to throw down heaps of zeros. But this is the most important skill. If you can understand how to take 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures, I guarantee you're going to find this topic nice and cruisy. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later.